Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I'm Florencia Romano and this is my day-by-day experience at Escuela Técnica 3138 Alberto Einstein. So let's start with my first day. I worked with Primero Quinta del Ciclo Superior, and the English lesson for them usually starts at 4 and finishes at 6, but for some reason this time the timetable has changed, so they had classes from 4:30 to 6:30. I started the class around 4:45 as one of the administrative people of the institution had to talk to them. I began with the icebreaker activity. They had to use like, love, don't like, and my favorite food is to write 3 sentences about themselves. However, one had to be alike. That's why this activity was called Two Truths and One Lie. So we had to guess which sentence was false. I remember being in the middle of this activity when it started hailing. It was so annoying because the ceiling of that classroom is made of metal sheets, so it was impossible to continue. To make things worse, after a few minutes, the ceiling started to leak and we had to move to another classroom. Here I continued with the following activity that was a revision of vocabulary. In this case, it was food vocabulary. And then I introduced new terms, in this case, eating plates. I made them repeat the words aloud and we practiced the vocabulary with the what's missing technique. Then we continue with a game that was called Looking for My Food Match. In this game, I gave the students a piece of paper with a word. The students had to get up and find a person that had the same words. I had a few problems with the instructions in English. I had to check their understanding by using the mother tongue. Next activity was introduction of grammar, in this occasion countable and uncountable nouns, and also the indefinite article a, and, as well as the quantifiers any and some. First, I introduced the meaning of the words countable and uncountable. Then we classified the vocabulary into countable and uncountable. Later, I wrote examples with the quantifiers and asked questions about the form to guide them to the discovery of rules. Then we worked on the activities of the book and tagged them on the blackboard. I also invited them to write their answers on the blackboard. In order to close down with grammar, we played a game. In this game, I had to tell a noun and they had to get up and move to either to the side of the countable noun or to the side of the uncountable noun. They had 3 seconds to classify each word. They loved playing this activity. Finally, I made them write 3 sentences about their eating habits using adverbs of frequency and meals or parts of the day. I sticked a poster with the required vocabulary and structures and wrote examples using them. For the closure, I delivered exit tickets to each student to complete with what was hard for them, what they have to revise and what they liked and what they have learned that lesson. While they were still writing, I wrote the homework on the blackboard and explained the activities before saying goodbye. On my second day, the teacher was a bit delayed, but she finally came 5 minutes later. I thought that it was alright to go to the classroom to leave my stuff because I had too many things to carry. However, she told me that I need to wait for her to enter the classroom, no matter what. So it was my bad, and it was my mistake. So the lesson started, and the first activity was revision. So first I made them repeat the vocabulary learned and asked them about their homework. But only one student did the homework. So I talked to the teacher and we decided that they will not have homework because they just didn't want to do homework. They have lost the habit of studying and doing homework every single day. Okay, so instead of checking homework, we just did the homework at that precise moment. When I was finishing making the corrections, Miss Alicia arrived at my class. I got a little bit nervous, but managed to ignore her and continue. Then, in order to reinforce vocabulary, we played a game. I had stuck tape on the floor, and I had to show a picture to the participants. The students had to clap before answering and step forward to the next line if it was correct. They really enjoyed the game. However, they were a little bit shy and didn't want to participate. Therefore, I continued with the following step. The next step was reading. Speaking activity before going to the text. In this activity, I chose 2 students to respond to my questions. It was really nice. For the pre-reading activity, we read the titles and students guessed what was going to be the topic of the text. I read the questions that they had to do and gave them a few minutes to do the activities. For the post-reading activity, we read the text all together. I did it aloud, and we stopped at each paragraph to retell what each part said. After that, we responded to the questions while I wrote the answers on the blackboard. As a follow-up activity, they had to work in pairs and recommend an eating place. Then I chose some pairs to pass to the front of the class and share their dialogues. In the following activity, I presented grammar that was quantifiers using correct and incorrect examples. For the grammar practice, students worked on their workbooks. I gave them some minutes to complete the activities and then we checked in the blackboard. This time we had no time to complete the exit tickets, nor we played any other game that I had planned, but it was a nice class anyway. Following week, when I arrived, the personnel of the administrative sector told me that the group had been moved to another classroom, which is smaller than the previous one. Today we started a little bit later than the previous lessons as Miss Silvana had arrived 10 minutes late. First, we revised vocabulary and all the content that we have seen in the previous lessons. For this purpose, I drew a scale on the whiteboard and invited them to place the quantifiers in the corresponding place. Then we checked vocabulary, and they already knew all the words, so there was no need of making further practice. Therefore, I continued with the introduction of new vocabulary, adjectives to describe flavor. We repeated the words once more all together, and then we practiced it with a game. The game was called How is My Food? For this game, they had to form groups of 4, and one person of each group was going to act the adjectives with gestures. Each representative had 2 adjectives to act out. They really enjoyed this activity. And after that, we did a listening activity. For this stage, we first worked on guessing by looking at the pictures, reading the title and reading the glossary, and then we listened to the audio twice. Fortunately, they could understand almost all the words. Finally, we went to page 26 to answer the questions of the text. That was the one we had just listened to. The following step was the introduction of grammar. For this, I wrote a dialogue and asked the teacher to help me read it aloud. Then I started to ask questions. For example, what does the verb like mean? How do you use that verb to order food in Spanish? And similar questions. All these helped them to deduce the rules. Then we read the rules of the textbook and did the activities 6 and 7. After checking those activities, we had enough time, so I presented the final task and explained the activities for their presentations. For homework, they had to work on their dialogues. Finally, I gave them the exit tickets to complete before they left the room. In lesson number 4, I had to teach the last grammar points and revise previous knowledge. First, I asked them questions and showed them the vocabulary. Then we made a general revision of contents through a competition using Kahoot. I carried a set of 4 half-a-liter bottles of Coke and jelly beans as a prize. They had to respond quickly, and the group who got more points would be the winner. For this class, I needed the projector, my computer, an internet connection. As many ICT tools were needed, it was going to take time to start with the activity. When I wanted to connect my computer, I realized that I needed the HDMI cable because the projector was quite old. Luckily, a student had his computer and I could borrow it. However, I decided to start the activity without the projector. Students were working on their cell phones. Then we used the projector to go around each question and the correct answers. The following activity was the introduction of grammar. I made use of a dialogue and also recycled a structure that they have already seen in the previous lesson. So students were able to understand and their learning become more meaningful. Then we read the theory of the workbook and start working with the workbook activities. Next step was speaking practice. However, we couldn't do it as many students were asking for their final presentations. Therefore, I explained the final task again, giving a detailed structure to follow and more examples of menus and dialogues. Finally, they started working on their presentations while I was monitoring the activity and responding to their doubts. As a closure, they completed the exit tickets before leaving the classroom. Lastly, on day 5, the students were preparing themselves while I was checking that they did not have grammar mistakes. I gave them a peer assessment worksheet to work on while their classmates were talking. Then we arranged the class for their presentations and they began delivering them in pairs. I had several copies of the rubrics, which I used to evaluate their performance. Groups prepared excellent settings and scenery. I evaluated their dialogues, costumes, extra objects, and fluency when they acted out their roles. There was just a pair of students that prepared just the written dialogue but hadn't practiced it at all. It was the only group who couldn't pass the presentation. Then the rest did it amazingly. Finally, I asked them to arrange the class so as to share the food we had brought and made a toast. We talked, laughed, and invited a few people to the celebration. At the end, we took photos together. I thanked them for their collaboration and said goodbye to the whole group. All the group helped to clean and order the classroom before leaving the class. So that was all, and thank you for listening to me. Bye bye.